Amplify the organisers building solidarity, alternatives to narratives of pity and of charity. Amplify those battling in fights for liberation, for self-determination, who won't settle for a homegrown tyrant for their nation, who want to rise up with their class and not above their station. Oppositionists in countries where it's dangerous to oppose, those who go to places where the camera rarely goes. The minorities within minorities, on the margins of the margin, despised by all the authorities, nobody's priorities, whose voice deserves enlarging. Yes, I'm just trying to work out which poems to do. I'm doing two 15-minute sets. 15 minutes would generally be one long poem and four ordinary length poems.
But rather longer in the tooth. We're gobby, feisty, loud, uncouth. We're disaffected, middle-aged women. Kicking our heels against the wall and plotting in the shopping mall. Go tell them we're not playing ball. We're disaffected, middle-aged women. Armed with sertraline.
But around that time, when I was about 16, I was really into music, and particularly punk rock and other kinds of like rebel music and stuff. And I set up my own fanzine, and one of the people I interviewed for the fanzine was Attila the Stockbroker, who was a ranting poet, and I went and interviewed him and watched him perform his set, and that's how I discovered ranting poetry, which was not boring. Ranting poetry was interesting because it was lively and exciting, and it spoke about people's, ordinary everyday people's experiences, and it was funny and it was rude and it was rebellious, and I started going to more of those gigs, and then I thought, I can do that. I think I can do that, so I started doing it, and yeah, I spent the next couple of years travelling around doing gigs with people like Attila and John Cooper Clarke and Phil Jupitus, who used to perform as Porky the Poet at the time, and various other people. So yeah, that's how I first got into it. Music, you go to a particular gig, it's probably going to be, most people there are probably going to be around the same age. You go to a nightclub, probably most people will be there will be about the same age. But in poetry, it's a proper mix, and I think that reflects that poetry is a kind of, it's quite a democratic medium. So is it okay for the poster to say that it's okay to be not okay? Or would it be better put this way, that it's okay to say you're not okay? Because it's not okay. No, it's not okay that so many people are not okay. That it's the system that is sick. Beyond the days of the awareness of signal virtue and how much we careness, are those who rule us who could not care less if they tried. There's them and us, and they're on the other side. It's their system that's broken, not your feet of clay. So it is okay for us to say we want the pressure off today, for debt and worry to be taken away, to get support without delay, to have time to play. Because it's not okay. No, it's not okay that so many people are not okay. For me, the thing about poetry is you've got to have something to say. It's a medium through which you have something to say. And I think part of the reason I gave it up for 25 years is that I found other ways to say things. Like I got involved in trade unions, I was doing speeches at conferences and stuff, on demonstrations and that. So I was still ranting, I just wasn't doing ranting poetry. So for me, it's less about a career and it's more about getting people to think, spreading ideas around, encouraging other people to do similar things. And I also cross the worlds that I'm involved in the sense that, so I'm very politically active as a left-winger, and I like to bring politics into poetry and poetry into politics and bring the two together. Hi, Janine Booth, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. I'm going to talk quickly. I was shocked to read this amendment in a motion entitled Solidarity with Ukraine, because it shows zero solidarity with Ukraine.
It deletes the whole main motion. It deletes opposition to torture and sexual violence. It deletes support for the Ukrainian people's right to self-determination and their right to defend themselves. It deletes the demand to cancel Ukraine's debt. It deletes backing Ukrainian trade unions. It deletes any appreciation of the efforts of Ukrainian educators to work under war conditions. Your country's been invaded, your school and your town's been bombed, and you and your community and your nation are fighting back. What would you expect from international educators and trade unionists? You'd expect solidarity. You'd expect support. You'd expect support for the fight you're waging, and you want actions, not just words. What you wouldn't want is what this amendment offers. Deleting all the important commitments, mealy-mouthed condemnation of the invasion. This amendment mostly calls on Ukrainians to give up and on us to withdraw support from them. It calls on them to make peace with their assailants. Conference, I honestly think this amendment is an insult to Ukrainian education workers. It's an insult to Ukrainian trade unionists. It flies in the face of this union's stated commitment to international solidarity. Frankly, Conference, I think this amendment is unworthy of this union. Vote it down.
I think in the past, so in the 1980s, in my first iteration as a poet, I was one of only a very small number of women doing performance poetry at the time. And I didn't let that be an obstacle to me. And I think in a way it was beneficial because I could just tell people putting on gigs that they ought to have me on the bill, because otherwise it'd be sexist. They need to have a woman on the bill. But actually thinking back, it was tough. It was a challenge because people weren't being overly hostile to you, but it slightly blokey culture to it, and kind of forcing your way into that can be quite difficult. Something happened in the news that I really wanted to write a poem about, so I did. And what happened was the South African athlete, Oscar Pistorius, murdered his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp. And the newspapers and the telly kept referring to her as his girlfriend, as though she didn't have a name, as though she wasn't a person in her own right. And so I wrote a poem called Her Name is Reva. And that got me back into writing and performing, and, you know, the rest, as they say, is history. We squabbled through the winter. I felt and he drank bitter. He worked from dawn till evening while I did all the cleaning and cleared up all the crap that he left around the flat, and it felt I was in prison as a girl in my condition. And when I had the baby, he said he'd help me, maybe. He tried to make an effort, but pretty soon he left it. Flogged the telly for a pony and pissed it up with Tony. Spent weekends like a loafer, passed out on the sofa. In my first spell as poet in the 1980s, I didn't know I was neurodivergent. So I found out I was autistic in 2012 at the age of 45. Suddenly my life made sense. You know, neurodivergence was part of it. There's a certain amount of ADHD energy that goes into bouncing about on stage. There's a certain amount of autistic looking at things from different angles, memorising stuff. I think that's all linked to that kind of stuff. In my second wave of being a poet, since I started again in 2014, by then I knew I was neurodivergent, and it's been much more straightforwardly a part of what I do. I do have poems that are directly about experience as a neurodivergent person.
Where life on a spectrum is not to be feared, diversity is normal and no one is weird. Ditch the requirement for all to conform, broaden our meaning of what is the norm, change the arrangements, compete rather less, cooperate more, reimagine success. So when living's a right, not a gift or a perk, and we're working to live, we're not living to work, where skills are acknowledged, where talents are freed, from each by ability to each by need. Design a fresh start, where there's room to relax, to think, to create, to heal up the cracks.
What advice would I give to someone who was thinking about writing poetry? Is just write, and read and watch other poets. If you're writing to perform, then watch other poets. Go and watch them perform, watch them on YouTube, watch them in real life, You will pick up ideas and influences, but just sit down and write whatever you like. No one's going to see it if you don't want them to. You can just free write, just let all your thoughts come out on a page, and then you might look back on it later and you might think, well, that was a load of rubbish, and throw it away, which is fine. Or you might think, oh, that's mainly rubbish, but actually that line there, that really works. Maybe I could develop, those two words rhyme with each other. Maybe we can make something out of that. Yeah, just write.
Women